Good morning, students. Today I shall begin with the new chapter in business mathematics and business statistics. You all see that it's a new chapter, and which is basically time series analysis, right? So I have completed my index number. I have completed annuity, compound interest, as well as now this is basically the last chapter which I will be covered for your third semester. So time series analysis is basically, we have to know what is time series analysis. A time series is basically data to be arranged in a chronological manner. Means it is basically a set of observations which we take usually at some distant intervals of a variable, and which is basically dependent on time. Such a series of observation discloses the changes or variations in the value of the variable due to the change in time. For example, monthly production of cement, rainfall of different days, number of accidents on different days occur. This is basically, we can record this on a given time series data. Statistically, the procedure that we use such data and which we put that in the data, which we basically called as time series analysis. The basic assumption under time series analysis is that the factors which have influenced a date in the past and the present will continue to do so in the future as well. So what are the characteristics of time series analysis? We can study a graph. By plotting a graph, we can see that some of the movements in the graph exhibits a persistent growth. Means obviously the growth or a decline, it may happen. Or some of the movements has been shown that the regular or a periodic growth, which can be in a more than a year. Some of the movements may also show a irregular growth or irregular changes. A time series basically in general has four components. Basically it consists of four components. They are basically, number one, cyclical trend, or A, which we call as cyclical trend, right? What is basically the cyclical trend? This is basically a regular and a long-term upward or downward movement of data. It basically reveals the general tendency of data. Almost all the time it shows a tendency to increase or a decrease over a gradual period of time. That is basically a cyclical trend. Next is number B, seasonal variation. Seasonal variations. We have experienced different variations during different time of period. For example, during our winter season, we always require woolen garments to cover ourselves so that the cold doesn't catch up easily. Same wise, during the time of monsoon, we require cotton garments so that it feels less warm while wearing clothes. So even in terms of fruits also, in winter season there are few particular fruits which are available. For example, in summer season we have mangoes, watermelons, like that. And in winter season, basically the oranges are very good during that time. We know that the seasonal fluctuations. Next is basically a cyclical variation. Number C, a cyclical variation. cyclical variation means it's a long-term period movement with a period varying from 1 year to almost more than 10 to 12 years. It's a cyclical, means cycle. One cycle, when it completes, then comes the another cycle. This period of variation is basically a cycle, and it is not as regular that of seasonal variations, and it is also one of the most important variations which is less predictable than seasonal variation or a secular trend. Okay. For example, there are 4 phases of cyclical variation. These 4 phases are prosperity, recession, depression and recovery. Prosperity, recession, depression, and final one is recovery. Obviously, we have experienced these 4 cycles throughout our 10 to 12 years. Prosperity means you are basically growing, you are nurturing. And next comes the phase of recession. Recession means during that time, obviously, your growth is suddenly stops, and it basically try to depress you. Next comes the depression phase, where nothing has been gone as per your plan, as per your terminology you basically dealt with. Next comes to the recovery session. Now you are recovering, you are moving, you are trying to build a new sort of things with the same old purposes. That is basically the recovery session. Finally, the last phase or D, which we call as irregular variation. Irregular variations. In irregular variations also, we have 2 phases. One is catastrophic, I will explain that. And next one is accidental. Okay. Or residual, which we also call as residual. What is catastrophic? Catastrophic variations are due to specific events. It happens, for example, strikes, lockdowns, earthquakes, floods. These are the common examples. The accidental variations are due to multiplicity of causes of unknown origin. Obviously, you will not know when the accident will occur. If I am right now, I am explaining you one thing. Suddenly, where I am staying, some of the part of the ceiling has fallen down in my head, and I may get injured. This is obviously accidental. I cannot imagine of that I will be facing that type of problem, but it is obviously unknown. So basically, they are minor variations, are too small to merit the individual consideration. We know that, and these variations may be random in nature, and which the model which we will be using throughout our time series analysis, and also in time series analysis, one will be the multiplicative model and another will be the additive model. Multiplicative model is basically consists of all the factors which will be multiplied, and additive, you know that all the factors will be added up. And what will be the measures of trend which will be following? Next part is basically the measures of trend. Measures of trend. One is basically semi-average method. Number 2 is basically moving average method. And last but not the least is basically method of least square. Okay. Coming to the first method, which is the moving average method. Okay. So moving average is semi-average method. Sorry. First method is semi-average method. So in semi-average method is basically applied when the trend is linear. Linear trend. Linear means a straight line. The trend is basically going through a straight line. It is moving, but it's on a straight line. It is not moving in an upward, downward, or in a fluctuations. This is basically the semi-average method. In this method, the whole time series data in semi-average, the whole time series data are divided into two equal parts, and averages of each part should be calculated upon. When the number of observations, if the number of observations in semi-average method comes as even, there will be exactly two parts. But if the observations is odd number, then the central value is generally neglected when the division is made. Central value means, suppose the odd number is coming, suppose 5, means obviously the central value means maybe 2.5, but there will not be 2.5, so we will consider the 3 as the parity half. Then we will divide those first 3 with number 3, and the second half including that divided by number 3, we will get the averages. The two averages are then plotted at the midpoint. Obviously it will be plotted at the midpoint with respective intervals x and y. The line is basically required a trend line. The line which will be showing, maybe the line will be like that. This is the trend line, maybe trend line TL. That may be a TL or trend line, right? That can be considered as a trend line also. So when we will be doing that, we will be measures this thing. Next comes to the moving average method, which is basically one of the important methods, where the sums will be coming from moving average as well as method of least square. So moving average is basically the simplest method of functioning and obtaining the trend value with obviously a fair degree of accuracy. Moving average basically are the number of arithmetical average calculated through time series data, each based at a fixed number of consecutive observations. If the time series data are yearly, then moving average of period, maybe say R years, are a series of arithmetic average and are consecutively observations. So moving average, maybe it starts averaging the movement of the trend, maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and through which the averages should have been computed. And when the averages has been made through moving average, it has to be one of the method where it can be done through moving averages, and obviously there are certain merits. The merits are that it is flexible, and obviously it's not subjective, it's simple to understand, and this method is appropriate only when the trend is linear. If the trend is linear, this method is appropriately applicable, means moving average method. Cyclical fluctuations may be eradicated completely over here. Trend values cannot be determined for some period at the beginning and at the end. We have to compute through thoroughly, then we can determine the trend value. The method obviously cannot be used to forecast future trend, as the moving average assumes no definite mathematical law of change. It doesn't measure any mathematical law of change, so obviously we cannot do so. And next comes to the method of least square. In method of least square, we will be experiencing different leads. For example, linear trend, parabolic trend, and finally exponential trend. The method of least square is basically the most objective and widely used method in determining the time series data. When the data are plotted in the graph, it will be seen that all the points will lie on a curve, and quite a large number of curves can be drawn from the method of least square by inspecting between them. In order to find out the best fit to the data of least square, it is basically followed. Best fit, which will be the best fitted data as per the time series data. Method of least square provides that. We can have different trends in the value, which will be discussed when I am doing the sum. Linear trend, parabolic trend, and exponential trend. So this is basically the introduction class of time series analysis, which I think I hope to make you understand certain parts, and obviously I will provide you the material through your PDF and web matter, and remaining. So today is basically the last class before the pujas of your college of mine. Then after the vacation over, I'll start with doing the sums portion of time series analysis, starting with some semi-average method, then comes to moving average and method of least square. I hope I can make you understand a certain bit of things regarding this time series analysis. Do enjoy the puja very well. Stay blessed. Be happy. Thank you for patient hearing of my class. Have a nice day ahead.